There are few things out there that are considered masterpieces. Sometimes an idea comes along that would make you wonder how a person came up with this. Films like The Matrix and TV shows like Firefly, where the idea and the story just feels perfect. Another form of entertainment a lot of audiences, especially in the western parts of the world as well as Europe, aren't heavily introduced to is anime. Most general audiences' experience with anime comes from shows like Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z, and while both of these shows are incredible in their own right, they are generally aimed towards children. Anime is often misunderstood as just a cartoon made from Japan, and while that technically is the broad definition of what anime is, there is a lot more to it than that. Then comes a show like Cowboy BeBop, which at first glance seems like another highly stylized adult anime show, but this show became and is so much more than just a pretty anime. Hi there, it's me, the Average Critic. Don't forget to smash that thumbs up button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and let's talk about Cowboy BeBop, more than just an anime. First off, I have to say I didn't watch Cowboy BeBop as a child. I discovered it much later in the year of 2021 during the COVID-19 pandemic. Similar to what I mentioned before, my anime experiences, aside from a few films, was mostly Pokemon. I always had an utmost respect for what anime was, but I also understood that it isn't everyone's cup of tea. But when watching Cowboy BeBop, I could not get it out of my head. This show does everything right, and does everything different for all the right reasons. First, let's go back to the idea of what Cowboy BeBop is, which, similar to something like the TV show Firefly, which is actually a very similar show, the show is set in the year of 2071 and is the classic cliche of the perfection that is cowboys in space, but calls from more fantastic genres like noir, sci-fi, and western, mixing it all together to make something which, when we thought about, should be an overabundance of styles, but instead is a smooth blend of genres and themes. Let's talk about this show's cinematography, which offers some of the most beautifully rendered shot I have ever seen in anything. Obviously, having this show's very noir style, the show is going to have some very stylistic shots. But when adding those sci-fi elements, it creates this beautiful atmosphere as something that is beautiful to look at, like space, different planets and stars, and despite being very beautiful, it is also very cold and lonely, giving this show a sense of weight and balance, juxtaposing itself brilliantly. If everything is just pretty, then it isn't interesting enough. The music massively reflects the beauty of tragedy. If you are heavily into traditional jazz, I recommend listening to the series soundtrack, my personal favourite being Walk for Zizzy. You see, if you know anything about jazz music, despite its usual calm and relaxing sound, it usually has dark and sad underlining tones. Jazz became very popular in a time where racism and prejudice were considered social norms. Singers like Billie Holiday sung about the tragedies the black community went through, but used the music as a distraction. Despite the horrific things certain nationalities went through back then, they tragically accepted it. Cowboy BeBop's music is a reflection of the characters' lives. They accept their lives and move on. Their lives aren't perfect, but they are living. All the characters are dealing with loneliness of their past, and despite all of them not having a home, they find it in the ship and in each other. The show has a wonderful casual way of getting diversity in this series, as there are characters of plenty nationalities, as well as characters like VT, who is a woman who is mistook for being a man, and Gren, who is a man who has intersex qualities. It uses sexual gender very casually, but also accepts it. The show never places too much attention as to why these two characters are the way they are, bringing in a sense of accepting these characters for what they are. There is no prejudice in the world of Cowboy BeBop, so despite all nationalities and genders getting along, it somehow makes our characters feel even more alone. Something this show does so brilliantly, in a sense, is that it's a comedy, and yet it's a tragedy. Despite this show making you laugh out loud with some brilliant slapstick humour from characters like Ed and jokes between characters like Spike and Jet, it all hits even harder when the tragedy strikes for our characters. And it doesn't do it for shock value. Despite most episodes ending in quite a dismal way, it's never sad. It all feels bittersweet. Episodes never have a sad ending, but they also don't end with everyone walking off into the sunset living happily ever after. I love every single ending to this show. It has a beautiful piece of music and a little message of "See you soon, cowboy" just written on the bottom of the screen, just adding to this somber ending. But it's also kind of uplifting. The music, the characters, the story, it all feels indecisive on how you should feel. You're crying and yet you're laughing. Something sad happens and yet something lifts your spirits. Normal shows are usually about character arcs, your main characters learning things along the course of the journey, having a better understanding of themselves or the life they lived. But Cowboy BeBop, however, our characters learn nothing. None of them really want anything, they just earn their money and keep flying, which adds to the tone of every individual episode, as a ship passing from dock to dock, never truly finding a place where they belong. Their lives aren't meant to be an adventure, it's just life. Living day to day, same problems. Life isn't always an adventure, and it can be very mundane, and just to live a life, it's good enough. Characters are thrusted into the adventure out of a will to survive. They have to collect a bounty because they need money to buy food. They aren't thriving, they are surviving by the skin of their teeth. Half the time they don't even want to be on the adventure they are on. One of my favourite episodes is episode 8, Waltz for Venus, where a character called Rocco wants Spike to train him after seeing Spike take down some hijackers. Spike accidentally ends up being caught in Rocco's trouble through a complete accident. He helps Rocco out of guilt, laziness, and cause for doing the right thing. Rocco dies and his sister gets the healthcare she needs. Spike gets nothing. Just another day for him as he slowly looks up at the sky like a ship passing in the night. He is affected by the events, but he then moves past it. All the characters are like this on the ship, whereby the events affect them all, but they instantly move on because they have to. Whether it's Jet dealing with an ex-girlfriend, Faye trying to understand who she was, or even Ed finally finding her father. Which moves on to my next point of this show, which is the themes of dealing with one's past. Each character has a past they are trying to deal with. Spike coming from a crime syndicate, Jet being the last decent police officer in a corrupt system, and Faye being someone who can't remember her past and comes to terms with it. Especially when it comes to Spike and Jet, they have dealt with their past and put it behind them. They truly represent the tragedy of this show, as they both understand how hurtful the past can be. Spike has completely walked away from his past, and he doesn't even want to fight Vicious. He only does so when he has to. Faye, however, is in the middle between comedy and tragedy. She doesn't have a past and wants to understand it. We see throughout the whole series her trying to find any information for her past and getting ever closer and more excited. She doesn't experience the tragedy of her past till she remembers in episode 24. Throughout the whole series there is a sense of hopefulness to her, that she will learn who she was. When she finally does and she runs up that hill to her childhood home, it isn't there. Destroyed to the ground. She then becomes, like Spike and Jet, learning from her past and almost destroyed by it, but ultimately moving on from it, making her past a tragedy. Ed, however, being a person of youth, doesn't have any past, which is why she offers more of the comedy side of the show. She has no tragedy, and this is reflected in her entire personality. She is constantly acting in the present, and despite it being in the same episode with her father taking off with Macintosh,
it's McIntyre, actually.
She runs off to find him. Having that sense of youth in her, she doesn't care why her father left her in the first place, and that he just left her again. My interpretation is that she too will suffer the tragedy of her past with her father as she blindly chases after him. Cowboy BeBop is more than just an anime. It's perfection in every way. In music, characters, story, themes, and even diversity, despite this show coming out in 1998. If you had never given anime a try, this show is the best place to start. With beautiful animation style, an incredible score, and a moving story that is just blissful to watch. Its themes on loneliness and dealing with your past will stick with you forever. So after all that, it gets my professional and personal rating of 10 out of 10. Every episode is just a blast to watch, incredibly funny, deeply moving, and it will stay in your head forever. So thank you so much for joining me in this very special video. I am so sorry this took a bit of time to get out, but obviously I had to watch the entire series and it has taken a bit of time, but I do hope you enjoyed it. If you have seen Cowboy BeBop, let me know in the comment section some of your favorite moments, and if you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe to the channel and check out some of my other videos right here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.